Welcome to Fight Waves. Audio Journeys by Kung Fu Academic. Have you ever seen a broadsword with like this colorful scarf attached to the end? So many people think it's, making it more difficult for your opponent or your enemy to actually focus on where your weapon is. Some other people think that this is only for the effect, but actually there is a practical reason for that, and it's none of these. Remember to subscribe and go grab my free training session. The link will be in the description, and I hope I see you there. For Kung Fu weapons, it's usually one of the reasons why people get into training Kung Fu, because they want to try what it feels like to be able to, do stuff with a sword or with a spear. And I can't blame them, because weapons are really one of the coolest part of Kung Fu training. And if you are new to this space, let me just list a few of them so you have an idea what I'm talking about. So for short weapons, we have a sword, we have a broadsword, which is a weapon that's curved, like a curved sword with one sharp edge only, opposite to sword, which is supposed to be sharp on both edges. Then we have daggers, we have butterfly knives, which are basically just like very wide knives, originally for cutting fish. And then on the long weapons side, we have, of course, a stick or long pole. Then we have a spear, which is a long stick with basically a knife on the top. We have a halberd, we have a fork, which was originally a weapon for chasing tigers, and then also a weapon to chase like a bad spirits away. So people would hang it on the walls of their houses for protection. So these are some of the typical weapons, but of course we have more. We have like a wooden bench, we have a chain whip, or a fan, which is not really in our style, but nevertheless it's famous for Tai Chi. So the arsenal is quite big, and when you start learning, there is some kind of structure. So you start probably with a stick, because it's the most basic one, but also it teaches you things that are then important for the other weapons as well. And we call spear is the king of the long weapons, and the sword is the queen of the short weapons. And they really are quite difficult to master, because the movement is sharp but soft at the same time, and it takes years of practice. For me, my most favorite one was a long stick, a long pole, and then a broadsword. Originally, I didn't really like the broadsword because I thought it's quite rough. But then, after some years, I kind of like became friends with the broadsword. And I also competed with some other weapons. So, for example, one of the things that happened to me was at some European championships. Like, it was a bigger competition, and I had daggers, so like two pair of knives, one in each hand, and I was performing a form, and I stabbed myself in the leg right like in the beginning. But I didn't know if I'm actually bleeding or not, so I completed the entire form without looking at my leg and not knowing whether I'm like bleeding, and just looking like an idiot performing the form, in front of the judges and the audience. But then luckily, actually, I didn't. It was like, all right. And probably the judges didn't really see when I stabbed myself, so that was all good. But another funny thing happened to me when I was at, I think it was also European Championship when I was competing with a pudao, which is like a halberd, uh, a stick with a broadsword in the end, and I cut myself in the leg, and that just threw me out of balance. Like I forgot what I'm doing, so I just kept rotating it around myself. You know, this kind of like a rotational swing around your body. I turned a few directions, and then I just gave up. I stopped. I greeted because when you compete in a like performing the forms, you greet in the beginning and in the end with like the special kung fu salute, and then I just left the platform and I got mark 0. So, but that is not the best story with weapon. Um, I'm not the main character, but one of my friends, he was competing with a stick, and there is a motion where you swing or you slam the stick from up to down, and you finish by stopping your hand on your leg, on your thigh. So you kind of like hit yourself in the thigh, but not really. And the stick, as it's kind of bendy, would bend, maybe touch the floor a little, but won't break. Well, his stick actually broke, and not like not like in a normal way, but like as he hit his own leg with his like hand holding the stick went into two pieces, and the top piece just went flying up like 5 meters and then hit the ground, and he was still like standing there with half of his stick, not moving. Then he slowly stood up, he took the stick, he greeted, he saluted to the judges, and then he left the platform, and everyone was laughing so hard, including the judges. Talking about competitions, when we flew to other countries to compete as like the national team, which I was part of for several years, especially when we flew to China, because all the world championship for kung fu or traditional wushu always happened in there. Then it was a question like how we going to transport the weapons, because so let's say that everyone, each of us was competing in 2 or 3 divisions, and 2 of them were weapons. So that means for 5 people you would have probably 10 weapons, and that's quite a big package. And a stick can be up to like almost 2 meters. So imagine flying with something like that. And especially if we decide to buy some weapons to fly back, because it's not easy to find a good shop to buy the weapons at home. But when you travel to China to a competition, usually those like companies, they would set up their booths there at the competition, so you can like go and just like shop whatever you like, which is exactly what we did. And everyone bought like swords and like weapons and like things that maybe they don't even train with, but because they were cool, so they bought it, of like very like crazy shapes, crazy shaped weapons. So once we were flying back home, and while we were waiting for our luggage, we just mentioned aloud, saying something like, "Oh, let's see if our weapons come back in a good condition." And the police officer actually heard us, and he was like, What do you mean? Like you are transporting weapons, but then I have to report it." And we were like, No, this is not that kind of weapons that you are thinking. And he was like, No, there's no way. You need to report it. And so when we got our package, we took out one of the swords. And if you ever seen like a competition kung fu sword, they are very like soft. So we pull out the sword, and the blade just went down, like if it was like made of something soft like a paper. And the police guy looked at us, and he was like, "Oh, okay, well, these kind of weapons, well, you should have said so earlier." And then he just like let us go. So the thing about like these like flexible soft weapons, is there's actually a reason for that. So when in the beginning of competitions in Kung Fu, if the judges wanted to see that like the force you produce will go from like through your entire body, like from your footwork, your hips into the tip of the weapon. Let's stay with the sword. Then if the sword is made of kind of flexible material, then it would make this like crackling sound, so they can hear that the force went through the entire weapon to the tip of the weapon, and they can also see it because the blade will react with the movement and the crackling sound. So that is why the competition weapons were not like rigid. But then the problem was because for modern wushu they needed like much lighter weapons, and also ideally producing a bigger sound and making bigger movements. So then the blades were suddenly like very soft and very thin. And that's why lots of people make fun of us, because when they see our weapons, they look like faded flowers because like they don't even like point up straight, which is definitely a problem. But I always say, since you are not training for a war, then your wrist doesn't have to be that strong. Like for sure, it's important to know how a normal weapon feels like and have some training in, and stay away from like the very soft ones and light ones, because that's just like for us traditional practitioners, it's a toy. But you don't really necessarily need to like train with a heavy one or like a very heavy one, especially for like people of nowadays. And training with weapons can still bring like lots of benefits, even though if you are not competing and even though you are not training for a war, such as it's really like shows you if you are using your waist, your hips, or not. Because if you are not using it, then you have to do all the hard work with your arms, and you just can't produce so much force. Plus, it's a very good indicator if your stances and your entire like body movement is actually functional. If you are producing the force where you are supposed to, like in the right direction, such as like if you punch with your fist, sometimes you don't really see that actually your movement is broken. But if you have a sword in your hand and you are supposed to stab, and your sword is like not moving or reacting in the way it should, then it tells you, okay, you are doing something wrong. There are some gaps, or there is like something is broken about your movement, and you need to have a look where is the problem. Okay, a bonus question for you. So have you ever seen a broadsword with like this colorful scarf attached to the end? So do you know what is it for? So many people think it's usually it's red, that it's for making it more difficult for your opponent or your enemy to actually focus on where your weapon is, because the eyes will always go to the red color. Some other people think that this is only for the effect, because when you perform with a sword or broadsword, then it's cool to have this kind of like colorful thing at the end. But actually there is a practical reason for that, and it's none of these. The reason is, if you are, let's say in a battle, then your hands are probably slippery from all the liquid, around, like blood. And because your weapons is sliding off your hands, so for the security reason, you would wrap that cotton thing around your hand and then hold your broadsword, so you won't lose your own weapon. So now you know. Let me know that you enjoy my content by subscribing, and also go and grab yourself a free training session with me. The link is in the description. Also, in the near weeks, I'll be opening online coaching program. This will be very much with a personal touch, because I would like to have a person-to-person relationship with everyone going through this kind of coaching. So even though it will be online, there would be lots of interaction and feedback, and I will be opening only 5 spots. So if you think you are interested, you can leave your email in the comments, so I will send you the information before anyone else, so you can have an upper hand. Thank you for listening, and see you next time. Have a great day.